As Pam said, this is Edie Elliott. I'm the cataloging supervisor at the Edwardsville office for SHARE for the Illinois Heartland Library System. Today's presentation is called Looking Through a Cloudy Crystal Ball, the Future of Cataloging. So, all right, I need to see how to move my slides forward. There we go. So here's what we're going to be looking at today. We're going to just look at some of the things that are going on in the cataloging world, some of the changes that are coming, some of the new things that are being developed. I'm going to talk about whether cataloging is relevant still. Does cataloging actually have a future? We're going to look at the new RDA toolkit. We're going to look at the new library reference model, the IFLA LRM. I'm going to look at linked data. I'm going to talk about BibFrame a little bit, what's going on there. And I'll talk about some proposals that have come up about ISBD punctuation. And let me just add a disclaimer right here. If you think that because I'm the one doing this presentation, that means I'm very knowledgeable about these things and I understand all of these new concepts, that is so not the case. What I'm telling you today is pretty much all I know from what I've read and looked at. So these are all things that are new, and we're all going to be learning about this together. So cataloging actually does have a future. There has been an idea that because of the internet and search engines and keyword searching, that cataloging really isn't needed anymore, but I don't agree with that. I think there's always going to be a need for information to be organized and for it to be findable, which is what cataloging does, but cataloging has changed along the way, so let's kind of look at how it's evolved. So in the beginning, back in the day, you know, when books came in, it was just written down in a ledger. But then as time went on, people started typing the actual manual catalog cards, filing them in an organized way. Then in the 1960s, MARC was created. MARC stands for Machine Readable Cataloging. It was that computerized framework that allowed bibliographic information to be presented in an automated environment and to make it searchable and able to be edited. And then we have today's online catalog, which of course are much more sophisticated and continuing to change. So cataloging is evolving, although I would say that evolution has been at a relatively slow pace compared to other advances in technology. But it's continuing to evolve, and we're going to talk about some of those ways today. So what is cataloging going to look like in the future? So let's look at some of the things that are shaping the direction of cataloging as we move forward. The first one is the new RDA toolkit, which we've been hearing about for a long time. This is the complete redesign of the current RDA toolkit that a lot of us were just beginning to understand, and now it's going to be completely changed. It's not yet ready. It's still in beta release. The final version has to be approved by the RDA steering committee or the RSC before it can be implemented. So right now we're still using the current RDA toolkit until we hear differently. According to the RSC website, they were hoping for their goal for getting the fully functional site ready to go was early 2019. And we are now in early 2019, and I haven't heard anything yet. I don't know if anybody else has, so apparently there's still things to be worked out about it. So in the meantime, we're still using the current toolkit. You can look at the new beta site of the RDA toolkit on the rdatoolkit.org website. You do have to have a subscription to the current RDA toolkit to be able to look at the beta site. You can get a 30-day free trial subscription if you want. So the RSC recommends that get in there, look around the beta site. There's a place on the site that you can provide feedback to them, and they welcome that feedback. So let's just look. I don't know how many people have actually been into the site to look around. Here's an example page from the site. It's laid out differently than what we've seen in the current toolkit. If you look across the top there, it's got those main categories: entities, guidance, policies, resources. Entities include the ones that we are learning about or know from FRBR: work, expression, manifestation, and item, but there are some new ones in there now. Agent, place, nomen, time span. So those are the ones that we're going to have to learn about as we go along. Guidance is the instructions on how you enter these things. Policies are the policies from various national libraries. Right now, all that's in there, I think, is the British National Library and the Library of Congress, but eventually there will be other policy statements in there. Resources include things like a glossary and the appendices about initial articles and capitalization and some other things. So it does look different. One of the big changes from the current toolkit to this toolkit is the lack of numbering of any of the paragraphs. So there won't be any more of, what we're used to, the RDA 2.2.1.1.5 like we hear now. That's been one of the big things that they've gotten feedback about the lack of numbering. So far, understand they intend to keep it that way. I don't know if that will change. So the basis of the new RDA toolkit is the library reference model, which was created by IFLA, which stands for the International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions. That's an organization that represents libraries and information services and people that use those services. The library reference model, you can see their definition there. It's a conceptual model for bibliographic information. And like I said, the new RDA toolkit is based on this library reference model. The library reference model, or LRM, is an entity relationship framework. So an example is, what is the relationship of the entity, the person, Lee Child, to the entity, the novel, The Midnight Line? So he's the author, that's the relationship. So just like FRBR, LRM is all about relationships. So this takes in, the LRM takes in the three current conceptual models that are out there right now. First one is the functional requirements for bibliographic records, or FRBR, which we are beginning to know but have not yet come to love. Also includes the functional requirements for authority data and the functional requirements for subject authority data. So these three models were created by three different task groups at different times. Each one of these models has a different focus. So this LRM, this library reference model, is pulling together all of these current conceptual models. The LRM is based on 5 user tasks. 4 of those, the first 4, we already know from FRBR. So find, identify, select, and obtain. The 5th one is kind of new with the LRM. That's called explore. And their definition is to discover resources using the relationships between them and thus place the resources in a context. So that's something additional that we didn't have under FRBR. So that kind of expands, the LRM kind of expands on those user tasks. So LRM defines some entities in 3 levels, and it is a hierarchy. The top level is called res, and that encompasses all of the levels underneath, both the 2nd and 3rd level entities. Res stands for, it's a Latin word that means thing. But a thing doesn't necessarily mean just a physical object. It can be a person, it can be places, it can be a concept. So really everything is a res. On the second level, which is a subclass under the top level, we see the entities that we know from Ferber, the work, expression, manifestation, and item, and then we see those 4 new ones: agent, nomen, place, and time span. Nomen is one of the new ones that I think is really hard to understand. Nomen is a way to refer to something, so it's like a name for something, but there can be more than one nomen that represents the same thing. So for an example, cat is an English word for a particular animal, but that same animal in Spanish, the nomen for that animal is gato. So those are both nomens for a cat. Another way of referring to a cat is the Dewey Decimal number 636.8. So that's another nomen. So all of those things are nomens, and that's one of the new entities under this LRM. Then the third level entity just breaks out the second level entity, agent, into a couple of sub entities, so person and collective agent. So we have this LRM conceptual model, we have these entities, but the part that isn't clear, at least to me yet, is what this means in practical terms for us as catalogers. Why do we need to know something is a res or something is a nomen? How does that translate into what we put into a bib record and how we put it and what mark field we use? That's the part that I think we're going to need a lot more information on. And hopefully we'll get a lot of training or things coming out to help to explain those things to us when the new RDA toolkit is implemented. So remember when we were talking about the 5 user tasks under LRM, one of those was explore, which was to discover resources using relationships between them and placing them in a context. So linked data is a way of doing that. This definition from linkedata.org website says it refers to a set of best practices for publishing and connecting structured data on the web. So the big thing there, I think, is the connecting part. So for bibliographic information, it's a way of making that information accessible beyond your local catalog. So right now, if you're in your own catalog and you click on a link for an author's name, it's going to take you to other resources in your catalog for that author. With linked data, if you click on that author's name, it can take you to other places on the web that have information about that author or other resources related to that author, maybe the author's website, maybe a Wikipedia entry about that author or some other entry about that author. At least that's my understanding of what linked data does. And that understanding is very, very simplified. I'm not a bit high tech, so how this all exactly works, I'm not really sure. So I'm hoping that I'm explaining this correctly. Like I say, it's a very, very simplified version of how I think this works. So anybody out there who can help make it clearer, please chime in and help us. I took an online class about linked data a year ago or so, and I still don't really get it. So I think it's going to take a lot more training and reading and understanding on my part before I actually get how it works. Anyway, the way I think it works is pieces of data are represented by what's called a uniform resource identifier, or a URI. A URL, for example, is a type of URI that identifies a website. But a URI can identify a person, it can identify an idea, it can identify any entity. So then the relationship between one piece of data and another, those relationships are recorded using what's called an RDF triple. And RDF stands for Resource Description Framework. So again, a very, very simple example. So a name, say, of an author is represented by a URI. The title of the work that that author wrote is also represented by a URI, and the relationship between that person's name and that work is a concept that he is the author or she is the author. So these three pieces of data are related to each other through these URIs and through this RDF triple concept. So here's a really, really simple example that comes from a website called WordLift, and there's actually a little video that I posted the link to that video on the resources slide, so you can kind of look at that if you want to, or look for other videos having to do with linked data. So again, this is a really, really simplified example. So in this example, the fact that Jason knows Marie is a triple. The fact that Marie's birthplace or has the birthplace of Italy is also a triple. And those things are kind of related to each other through these this RDA triple framework. Again, how that all happens in practical terms, I don't know. So let's look at a bibliographic record. This is a sample of a bibliographic record in linked data, using linked data. This is the bib record for an audiobook by Bill Bryson called A Walk in the Woods. You can see linked data, a linked data record on worldcat.org. WorldCat.org is just a way of searching WorldCat through a web interface. If you go on there and you pull up any record and you scroll down to the bottom, there's a little place there where you can click on it. It says linked data, and it shows you this view. So each one of these pieces of information, the title, the author, the subjects, they all are identified by these URIs. So this may be the future of what bib records look like, but this is just an example of a linked data record for this particular bibliographic record. So how and when is linked data going to be implemented in libraries? Again, what does linked data mean for us as catalogers in practical terms? Right now, not much. If you can see these quotes from the RDA Steering Committee website, there needs to be a framework compatible with RDA that we can use to enter bibliographic data into a linked data format. And then need to be enough libraries that are willing to actually use it and implement it. On this first paragraph, you can see it says that will be difficult until MARC is either changed or replaced. So I don't know when that will happen. But in that second quote, it said something about important work being done about linked data, and this is some of that work here. This is a grant that was given to Stanford Library and some other libraries, including Cornell, Harvard, and the School of Library and Information Science at the University of Iowa. And the grant was given to them to start working on a way to implement linked data for the library community. Not sure how long they've been going. I think it's probably been a couple of years, maybe, not sure exactly. They are ongoing right now. They're in the second phase of their study, which is actually, some developing ways to actually implement this linked data. If anybody went to ALA Midwinter, there was a BibFrame forum there. I didn't go, but I saw some slides from that BibFrame forum on the BibFrame website, and part of that was an update on this linked data for production grant project. So they're going to be, part of what they're doing is to develop open source tools for libraries to use to implement linked data. It said they may have something ready for testing by April. Have not heard anything more, so more to come on that. But again, I think it will be a long time before it will be widely available and affordable for libraries to use. I think there's a lot more testing and development that's going to need to be done. So part of the move toward using linked data in libraries is something that will replace MARC. And that's something that's being worked on by the Library of Congress is this Bibliographic Framework Initiative, or BibFrame. It's been in the works for a long time, something we've been hearing about for a long time. It is the proposed replacement for MARC. It's presumed to be more compatible with a linked data environment, more able to help us implement linked data. There was also a presentation about this during that BibFrame forum in ALA, so the slides from that forum are available on the BibFrame website if you want to take a look at them. It's still in development. I didn't see anything looking through those slides. I didn't see anything about a projected date when it would be ready for widespread use. And even when it is implemented, even the Library of Congress realizes that there's going to have to be a shared MARC and BibFrame environment for many years after BibFrame comes into use, because there's going to be, it takes time for these systems to be switched over. So we're going to have both for a while, after many years probably after BibFrame is implemented. So here is an example from the bibframe.org website of the BibFrame editor, like a sample work form of how you can create a new bibliographic record. So you can go in there and you can play around with this editor and try creating a record. I think there's a way on there that you can also, or it shows like converting a MARC record to a BibFrame record. I think there's somewhere in there that you can either look at that, or they have some samples of that. I haven't played around with it a lot for a while. Anyway, this is a place that you can go and just play around with BibFrame. In a way, it looks a little easier than MARC. It looks like just a form that we're going to fill in, and then we don't have to worry about the coding part, which would be nice. So we'll see how that goes with BibFrame. Another thing that came up on some listservs several months ago, I haven't seen anything on it lately, was some recommendations from the Program for Cooperative Cataloging, or PCC, and a MARC task group about ISBD punctuation. And one of their recommendations was talking about taking away the terminal periods from MARC fields. Another one was taking away that punctuation, that ISBD punctuation in between subfields in MARC records. ISBD punctuation came into use in the 1970s. These groups feel like, as we move toward a linked data or more of an online environment, that it's not really needed anymore. It doesn't really serve a purpose. There is a website that the Library of Congress has created, so you can kind of take a look at this. There's some test sets. You can see what you think about it. They did talk about it a little bit on the slides that I looked at from that BibFrame forum. As part of BibFrame, about possibly removing or not using that ending period on MARC fields. So, it may be rolled in with whatever happens with BibFrame, but I have not heard anything about this for several months now. So not sure exactly what's happening with that either. So we've looked at some of the things that are coming up or are in development as far as cataloging, some changes in the cataloging world. We looked at the new RDA toolkit. We looked at the library reference model created by IFLA, looked at linked data, looked at some changes coming up with BibFrame as a replacement for MARC, some possible changes as far as using or not using ISBD punctuation. We really don't know at this point what cataloging is going to look like in the future, but we know there will be a future of cataloging. So hopefully we can just go into it with open minds and curiosity and be willing to learn something new, which is sometimes hard. The willingness to learn something new is sometimes difficult. But I think we'll be fine. We've evolved over the years and we will continue to evolve. So here are some places, some websites you can go to get some more information about some of the things we've talked about today. And if you actually look at these websites, like the one about the library reference model and one about linked data, and it becomes crystal clear to you and you understand it fully and completely, then I need to talk to you because I don't quite get it all yet. So thanks for coming to the presentation. Here are the people that are on the call with me today. I've got Ian Anderson, who's cataloger for the CMC in our Champaign office. Got Shelley Stone, who's Share Manager for Bibliographic Services in the Illinois Heartland Carbondale office. Got Dr. Pam Thomas, who's a Bibliographic Project Coordinator in the CMC, and she's also in the Champaign office. So I'm going to open it up for questions about today's topic, and then after that we can look at questions about other cataloging issues. But first of all, let me just ask, have any of you actually been into the new RDA Toolkit beta site and looked around? And if you have, what do you think about it?
Hi, Edie, this is Pam. I'm just going to read a statement that Robert added. Hang on, because it's long. He says, here is one definition of RDF triple. As its name indicates, a triple is a set of three entities that codifies a statement about semantic data in the form of subject, predicate, object expressions, e.g. Bob is 35 or Bob knows John. For example, one way to represent the notion the sky has the color blue in RDF is as the triple, a subject denoting the sky, a predicate denoting has the color, and an object denoting blue. Therefore, RDF uses subject instead of object or entity, in contrast to the typical approach of an entity attribute value model in object-oriented design. Entity sky, attribute color, and value blue.
Okay, thanks for that explanation. I hear that term semantic web a lot, and I am not actually real clear about what that means either. So maybe that's somebody that's good on web design or programming or coding can kind of, give us some instruction on that. It might be a nice topic for a future Online with the CMC session. If there's somebody out there that is really good at explaining this in layman's terms, that would be great. But this is, I can see this, what you're talking about in this explanation. So thank you.
And Victoria says, thank you. Looking at how cataloging may change is kind of exciting.
It is exciting. It is a way to get your resources out there beyond your catalog and to, one of the things in that LRM definition of the Explorer user task was to put resources into a context. So, it kind of takes it just out of your local catalog and puts it into the whole wide world. So yeah, that is kind of exciting. So has anybody been into the beta site and looked around?
Yes. but I'll let others talk. So if you have a question, go ahead and type it in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself. And to do that, you just click on the microphone that has the red line, and then the red line should disappear and you can talk and ask your questions. So Edie is curious if anybody has played around in the RDA Toolkit beta site.
So Pam, have you been in there?
Yes, I have, and I find it very confusing.
Well, that's no change for me from the current RDA
Right.
toolkit. I
Yeah,
find that
but
confusing as well. So
I think it's more confusing. Okay,
yeah.
so Dina says, I have, but just briefly. To me, anything is an improvement from what they currently have. Okay. And Victoria says, nope, don't even have current RDA toolkit access currently.
Yeah, well, that is the issue. You do have to have a subscription.
So you have to have a subscription even to do, you don't, even for the beta?
Yes, you have to
Okay.
have a subscription to the current toolkit to get to the beta
to the
site.
beta.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. What about, oh, here we go.
We've got a, Barbara asks, has there been any feedback from the major ILS vendors about how they will implement or phase in linked data?
I have not seen anything. If anybody else has, feel free to put something in the chat or unmute yourself and say, I think the vendors are kind of waiting until there's something, you know, like maybe the LD4P grant, when they finish their testing. I think the vendors are going to kind of wait because I'm sure it'll be expensive for them to switch things over as well.
Dina says RDA Toolkit has never been real user-friendly. I agree with that. And Victoria says, if you get the trial, can you get into everything?
I believe you can.
I was wondering.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
So if you
I
did
believe you can.
I think, is it a 30-day trial?
30 days free trial, yeah.
So
you go to the rdatoolkit.org. There's information on it there.
Yeah, so then you could do the beta toolkit as well.
Yeah.
Okay, Connie says, if you don't have a current subscription to the toolkit, will you need it in the future?
If you want to be able to look at the rules and the guidance, yes. I think there is also a print version. There's a print version now available. Whether there's going to be a print version of the new toolkit, I don't know. That would be ALA Publishing, I think, would be the people that would do that.
Yeah.
But
the bad thing with the print is that if they're constantly updating the toolkit, then as soon as they print a version of it, it's outdated. That's just my opinion.
Right. But their subscription is something you have to, renew every year. So
right. Victoria says there are some documents, but it's hard to tell what's key on the LOC website.
Documents about the new toolkit?
Probably about, what was the other thing we were?
Oh, about RDA.
About implementing linked data, maybe?
Oh, yeah. About RDA,
about RDA in general.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's lots of stuff out there, but RDA has changed so fast. You can look at something from 2 years ago and has changed already. So it is hard to know what's the latest and what's key.
And I think that was the nice thing when we did, when we had AACR2 and we would get like the updates.
Right.
You
could just switch out
then you
those
knew
pages.
What was new.
Yep.
Now I kind of feel like I don't know what's new anymore, and like
I know.
I stumble across things, but I don't know that that's a great workflow. Lori asks, do the changes in updating in RDA affect those doing copy cataloging?
Absolutely. If you're upgrading records to RDA, I know in our catalog and share, the new records that we bring them in RDA. Some of that's original cataloging, some of that's copy cataloging. You still have to know the rules, whether you're doing original or copy. So yeah, if something changes, then that would affect copy cataloging as well.
Right, and even if you're just like updating records, you need to know that the 260 doesn't exist anymore and you
Right.
need to change
Right.
it to the 264. So,
Yep.
and then Victoria says, good question. Are OCLC catalogers auditing records?
If by auditing, do you mean are they checking them to make sure that they're good, complete records? I would say no. Lots of different levels of cataloging in OCLC records. So, and if that's what you mean by auditing, they,
I think so.
yeah,
She replied, boo.
yeah, I agree.
Yeah, she said, yes, checking and updating is what
Yeah,
she
I mean,
said.
RDA has, or not RDA, sorry, OCLC has some automated programs that they
Mm-hmm.
use to detect duplicate records, and they have, when you control headings in OCLC, which links the heading to an authority record. If the authority record changes, it will automatically change in the bib records. But and they have done some automated changes, like when they added the 33X fields to the records, even the ones that started out as AACR, and then they became hybrid records because OCLC went in and added the 33X fields. But as far as, checking records when they come in to see that they conform to RDA, current RDA, they don't. And also, you can still create records in AACR. There's nothing that
Mm-hmm.
says a library has to use RDA.
Right.
So you will still find AACR records in WorldCat.
OCLC. Yep. And there's a lot of hybrid records as well.
Yes, absolutely. So let me ask this. Has anybody seen the thread? I mean, this has been several months ago about the possibility of no longer using ISBD punctuation, taking away the ending period, taking away the punctuation in between subfields. And if you have any thoughts about that, when this first came out in our catalog, we just played around with a couple of records, took out the punctuation in between the subfields, and it really made for a ugly display in the pack. So like the publication information, the place and the publisher and the date, there was nothing to separate them. It all just kind of ran together on the same line.
So they were
So
all squished together.
yeah, well, I mean, there were spaces between them, but there was
There's
no
no
space
punctuation.
between it to kind of separate the place
Right.
from the publisher from the date. So it
Okay.
looked really, I
Odd.
didn't like how it looked in our catalog, but again,
Okay.
if this is all part of BibFrame and it changes when we switch over from ARC to BibFrame, whenever that happens, maybe it will change the display as well. I just didn't know if anybody had any thoughts about that.
Victoria asks, does the patron translation view of the catalog data still add the punctuation?
Ours does. It would depend on your catalog and how it's been, your pack and how it's been customized. Ours does.
Okay, and A. Anderson says, I've noticed records in OCLC that lack them, but thought that was error. I add the punctuation and believe it's easier to follow.
I agree. I don't know if those records that you've noticed in OCLC are new records or old records, because before, I mean, there are pre-ISBD punctuation records in OCLC that don't have that punctuation.
Right.
And I add that as well. But if these are new records, I haven't seen a lot like that, but I do add that as well. Because again, I think you're right. I think it makes it easier to on the display when you look in the pack.
And Amy says, I have no problem with getting rid of periods, but you do need some separation between fields. And Victoria says she
Yeah,
agrees with Amy.
I agree too. There was never, I was going to say that there was never any logic about what fields you end with a period and what you don't, but I'm sure there was logic about it. I mean, I'm sure when ISBD was created, it was created that way for a reason.
A reason, yeah.
Yeah, so what the logic was at the time, I don't know if that's relevant now. So, yeah.
Right. And maybe that's what they're trying to figure
Maybe,
out.
yeah. Yeah.
Amy says, I've seen British records with no punctuation, and these are in new records.
Yeah, the British National Library is, you know, they're,
You do things a little differently.
well, they do. And plus, I think they're kind of trying to keep up with these things. And I think they might,
Mm.
you know, kind of go along with PCC. You know, maybe it's something they're trying out. I don't know.
Oh yeah, they could be like a test
Yeah.
site or something. Robert says we use Mark Report, a Mark error checking software from the Mark of Quality. Currently it goes haywire if there are no periods.
Right, because currently we're using the ISBD punctuation. This recommendation to stop using it is just something that's in the recommendation phase. It's not anything that I've seen that
It's not
says
officially approved.
right. It's not
Yeah.
official,
Okay.
and so if it does become official, then Mark Quality will need to go in and update their software. But yeah, you're right. If it didn't have any punctuation, I think it would probably give you an error report.
And A. Anderson says some ILSs strip the periods.
Oh, I didn't know that. Does
And
it
Dina
make a
says love
better
Mark Report.
display? Yeah, I love Mark
Oh
Report
yeah,
too.
I don't know. A. Anderson,
Yeah.
does that make a better display without the periods? You guys are allowed to unmute yourselves and talk if you're in a space where that would not annoy others.
Yeah. So it says,
So A. Anderson says fine with me.
oh, okay.
So I guess it looks okay.
Doesn't seem to affect the display so much.
Okay.
Did anybody go to Midwinter? And if you went to Midwinter, did you go to that BibFrame forum? And was there anything in that forum that you'd like to pass on to the rest of us?
While we're waiting, just a reminder, we will have this presentation on L2 in a PDF format. So if you want to print that off. Sorry.
Yeah, I posted the slides yesterday. So
did anybody get to attend Midwinter and was it the BibFrame?
BibFrame forum is what it was called. You can see the slides on if you go to the Library of Congress BibFrame website, there's a little place over on the right where it says the BibFrame forum for Midwinter, and you just click on there and it shows you the slides from all the presentations. So
okay. I know I looked at the ones, there were a lot on RDA from last Midwinter that I watched. Okay, let's see. M. Buckley says, what does ISBD stand for again?
It stands for International Standard Bibliographic Description. Lots of acronyms in the cataloging world.
Oh, yes. Well, in library land. Dina says a little off topic. Will the Polaris 6.2 F grade presentation demo on February 28th be archived?
That I don't know.
I think they're recording it. So I would say yes, that
I would say probably so.
Yeah, watch it later or listen. I guess there's probably no visual. Maybe there is. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Maybe there's screenshots.
Yes, I think there will be visual and
audio.
It should be recorded. Yes, and audio, of course.
Hi, Shelley. So has anybody found any other good resources about any of these topics, linked data and the LRM and BibFrame, places that you have found that give good information about this?
A. Anderson says, for those who use RDA, do you have records in your catalog, both RDA and AACR2? Everybody does, right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we do for sure.
I don't know how you couldn't.
Yeah, because you've got older records probably that
Right. So you should have RDA, ACR2, and then hybrid.
Hybrids, you've probably
And
got
we
everything.
may even have some pre-AACR.
Right.
You might, yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So anybody have any good resources they'd like to share?
So we've got a little bit of time left. So if there's any other questions, I think we've probably exhausted this topic. If there's any other
What?
questions on cataloging that you'd like to ask in the time we have left, that's fine too. Or if you have more questions about this topic that we talked about today.
Yeah, and don't forget to fill out the evaluation on L2, please. If you are logged into L2, you just go under My Events, you find today's session, and the evaluation form is there. Because only 4 people filled it out from last month, and that's not a good percentage. We're just looking for feedback on these sessions, possible future topics, et cetera, et cetera. So does anybody else have, oh, okay. Tammy says, thank you so much for doing these sessions. You are welcome. Victoria says on L2, you said for the feedback, yes, the evaluation. If you go to the My Events and find today, the evaluation should be there. If it's not, please let me know and I will go in there and force it to appear. Edie, was there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I've pretty much told you everything I know about these topics.
I'm sure that's not true.
I have nothing else to add.
Connie says,
Pam.
thank you so much. It's exciting to see what may be coming our way. Yes, Shelley.
Can you tell us about the topics that you will be doing later on online with CMC?
I talked about the April and May. Did you want me to talk about the other ones?
Oh, I just thought people might be interested.
Okay, so in April, we're doing the 3-4X and the 5-3-8 mark fields. That's April 18th. On May 16th, we're doing basis of genre headings. August 15th, we're doing cataloging local authors. September 19th, we're talking about series. October 17th, we are talking about subject analysis. November 21st, we are going to be talking about cataloging kits. December 19th, cataloging foreign language materials, and January 16th of 2020, cataloging rare books. And these can all be registered in L2. They're already up there in the calendar. And they are the third Thursday from 10 to 11, just like we've been doing. Lori says, thank you. The information is appreciated and informative. So if we don't have, Dina says another informative session. Thank you. If we don't have any other questions, then I guess we will end today's session. And again, don't forget to fill out the evaluation form for today, please. And thank you, Edie, for presenting.
You are welcome.